Thanks for joining me for today's short scale study. Today, we're going to build our tone and technique in the key of concert B flat major. Let's jump in with number one, our major scale and arpeggio. Before we begin, I want to point out that we're going to need a second finger B natural fingering in this scale. Here we go, major scale and arpeggio quarter notes. 1, 2, start on C and go. Let's move on to number two, the major scale and arpeggio eighth notes. 1, 2, and ready, begin. Now we'll move on to the exercise called major chords. I'll play the lower set of notes. You join me by playing the upper set of notes. 1, 2, ready, and. Now we'll play the exercise called thirds. 1 and 2 and ready, begin. Good job so far. Let's move on to our chromatic pivot scale. Through our chromatic pivot scale, we should be familiar with many of the notes. Remember that there is a fingering guide in the back of this text that you can look at for some fingerings. Along the way today, I see that I want to remind you of your E flat fingering, second and third valve. And also the third note from the end, the C sharp fingering, first, second, and third valve. Here we go, the chromatic pivot scale. 1, 2, start with G and And now on to our chromatic scale. I've reviewed many of the fingerings and the finger pattern for the chromatic scale in some of my other videos. Check in on those or at the end of this method book at the fingering guide for the fingerings that are still not familiar to you. 1, 2, here we go. 1, 2, ready, and. Some of the fingerings that I find that my students have the most difficulty remembering are notes like C sharp on the way up, 1, 2, and 3, or D sharp on the way up, or A sharp, first valve. On the way down, sometimes they are confused with a G flat, and a G flat is our F sharp fingering. Another note that's often confusing is the second to last note, the D flat. It's our first, second, and third valve fingering like we use for C sharp. Let's finish today with our chorale. I'll play the lower set of notes, Join me and play the top set of notes. 1, 2, ready, begin. So there you have it, Concert B flat major. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you'll use this advanced scale study again really soon. Remember that you can always play these scale studies on your own. Make sure to use a metronome and set the tempo that's most comfortable for you. See you again soon. Keep practicing.